The morning sun painted the sky in soft colors over Verdania Prime. Lyra Moonwhisper stood at her kitchen window watching her husband Ben Parker work in their garden. His hands moved gently among the plants, checking each flower and leaf with care. She smiled as she watched him. After 3 years of marriage, she still loved seeing him so peaceful among his flowers. Ben was not like other humans she had met. Most humans were loud and rushed, always talking about big plans and important work. But Ben was different. He spoke softly and moved slowly. He never seemed angry or worried about anything. The other people in their small farming town called him the quiet one. Lyra was an elf with long silver hair and bright purple eyes. She worked as a plant scientist, studying how different alien plants could grow together. It was good work on Verdania Prime, where many different alien races lived. Together in peace, the planet was perfect for farming, with rich soil and gentle weather all year. She walked outside to join Ben in the garden. The air smelled sweet from all the flowers blooming around them. Ben looked up and gave her his gentle smile. "Good morning, my love," he said, brushing dirt from his hands. "The roses are doing well today." Lyra looked at the roses he pointed to. They were unlike any roses she had ever seen. The petals had a soft blue glow, and they seemed to hum with a quiet energy. These were not normal Earth roses or normal alien plants. They were something new, something that should not exist. "How do you make them grow like this?" she asked. She had asked this question many times before. Ben just smiled and touched one of the glowing petals. "I just listen to what they need," he said. "Plants are good at telling you things if you know how to hear them." This was always his answer. Lyra was a trained scientist, but she could not understand how Ben made impossible plants grow in their garden. The flowers and vegetables he grew were stronger and more beautiful than anything she had seen. They could survive in any weather, and seemed to help other plants around them grow better too. Captain Zara Blackscale walked up the path to their house. She was a large reptilian woman with dark green scales and sharp teeth. She had been a warrior in the Draconis Empire before, coming to Verdania Prime to run a small trading post. Now she was one of their closest friends. "Morning, plant lovers," Zara said with a laugh. "Ben, are you still talking to your flowers?" Ben smiled at her. "They have interesting things to say." Zara shook her head. "Humans are strange. On my world, we solve problems with strength and fire. You solve them with dirt and water." "Both ways work," Ben said simply. Dr. Maya Crystalsong joined them from the medical center next door. She was made of living crystal that sparkled in the sunlight. Her body was clear with hints of blue and green flowing through it like water. As the town's doctor, she took care of everyone's health. "Good morning, everyone," Maya said in her musical voice. "Ben, I still need you to come in for your yearly health check." "I feel fine," Ben said, still focusing on his plants. "That's what you always say. But the readings from last year were unusual." Lyra looked at Maya with interest. "Unusual how?" Maya's crystal body flickered with different colors as she thought. "His bone density is much higher than normal humans. His muscle tissue is different too, and his brain scans show patterns I have never seen before." Ben stood up and brushed more dirt from his hands. "Maybe your machine is broken." "I have checked it many times. It works perfectly with everyone else." Zara crossed her arms and studied Ben. "Now that she mentions it, you do move differently than other humans. Too smooth, too quiet." Ben just shrugged. "I like being quiet." The peaceful morning was broken by the sound of ships flying overhead. They all looked up to see large military vessels flying toward the town center. The ships were painted with the symbols of the Galactic Council. "What do they want here?" Lyra asked. They walked to the town square where a crowd was gathering. A tall human officer in a blue uniform stood on a platform. His voice was loud and serious as he spoke to the crowd. "Citizens of Verdania Prime," the officer said. "I am Commander Dale Morrison of the Galactic Council Security Forces. We are here on urgent business." The crowd grew quiet. Galactic Council. Ships only came when there was big trouble. "We are searching for a dangerous criminal," Morrison continued. "This person is known only as the Gardener. He is a human male, possibly hiding among normal citizens. Lyra felt Ben tense beside her, but when she looked at him, his face showed nothing. "What crimes has this person done?" Someone in the crowd called out. Morrison's face became darker. "The gardener has destroyed entire military fleets without firing a single shot. He has turned peaceful worlds into his own personal weapons. Everywhere he goes, normal life ends. Governments fall, armies disappear, and always he leaves behind only gardens where cities once stood." The crowd murmured with fear and worry. "How does he do this?" Zara asked loudly. "We don't know. He uses no normal weapons, no ships, no armies. But somehow he can turn the very ground beneath your feet into a trap. Plants and animals follow his commands. Even the weather seems to obey him." Morrison held up a device that projected a fuzzy image in the air. "This is the only picture we have of him. The image is not clear, but we know he is a human male, middle-aged, possibly working in agriculture or science." Lyra squinted at the blurry image. "It could be almost any human man. If you see anyone suspicious, report it immediately," Morrison said. "This criminal must be stopped before he can destroy another world. We will have patrols throughout your planet until he is found." The crowd began to break up, people talking quietly among themselves about this scary news. Lyra walked home with Ben, Zara, and Maya. "Can you believe it?" Zara said. "One human causing so much trouble across the galaxy." "It sounds impossible," Maya said. "How could one person do so much damage?" Ben walked silently beside them, his eyes focused on the ground. "Ahead." "What do you think, Ben?" Lyra asked. Ben was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up at the sky where the council ships were still flying around. "I think," he said slowly, "that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who look most harmless." That night, Lyra lay in bed listening to Ben work in the garden, outside their window. This was normal for him. He often worked with his plants late at night, saying they grew better in the darkness. But tonight, something felt different. She got up and looked out the window. Ben was kneeling among his roses, but he wasn't just watering them. He was talking to them in a voice too quiet for her to hear, and the plants seemed to be moving in response, bending toward him like they were listening. As she watched, one of the blue roses began to glow brighter, then another. Soon the entire garden was filled with soft light that pulsed like a slow heartbeat. Ben stood up and looked directly at her window. Even in the darkness, she could see him clearly. He was smiling, but it was not his usual gentle smile. This smile was different. It was the smile of someone who knew many secrets. He raised one hand and waved at her. The glowing roses swayed in a breeze that touched nothing else in the garden. Lyra stepped back from the window, her heart beating fast. She had lived with Ben for 3 years. She thought she knew everything about him, but as she watched the impossible light show in their garden, she realized she might not know her husband at all. Outside, Ben continued his quiet work among plants that should not exist, under the light of stars that had seen the rise and fall of 1,000 worlds. And somewhere in the darkness, the Galactic Council ships searched for a criminal who might be closer than they could ever imagine. The next morning brought more Galactic Council ships to Verdania Prime. They landed near the town and set up a temporary base with tall metal walls and guard towers. Soldiers in blue uniforms walked through the streets, asking questions and checking identification papers. Lyra watched from her kitchen window as 2 soldiers approached their garden. Ben was already outside, working among his flowers like nothing had changed. The soldiers stopped at the garden gate and called out to him. "Excuse me, citizen. We need to ask you some questions." Ben looked up from his roses and walked over to them. His movements were calm and slow, just like always. "Of course. How can I help you?" "We're looking for suspicious activity. Have you noticed anything unusual in this area?" Ben shook his head. "No, nothing unusual. Just me and my plants." One soldier pointed at the glowing roses. "What are those? I've never seen flowers like that before." "Hybrid roses," Ben said simply. "I like to experiment with different plant types. They're glowing." "Some alien plants do that. It's natural." The soldiers looked at each other. The first one stepped closer to the garden gate. "Mind if we take a look around?" "Not at all," Ben said, opening the gate for them. Lyra watched as the soldiers walked into the garden. They moved carefully among the plants, looking at everything with suspicious eyes. One soldier reached out to touch a glowing flower. The moment his finger touched the petal, his weapon made a strange buzzing sound and went dead. The small computer on his arm flickered and shut off. Even his communication device stopped working. "What happened?" the soldier asked, shaking his weapon. Ben frowned and looked concerned. "I don't know. Maybe the plants have some kind of electromagnetic field. Some alien species do that to protect themselves." The second soldier's equipment started, failing too. Both men looked worried as their technology stopped working around them. "We should go," the first soldier said. "We'll need to report this to the commander." They left quickly, their broken equipment hanging useless from their belts. Ben watched them go with his gentle smile, then went back to tending his flowers. Lyra felt a chill run down her spine. She had never seen anything like that before. How could flowers break military equipment just by being touched? Later that day, she met Maya at the medical center. The crystal doctor was running tests on some plant samples that Ben had given her. "Weeks ago? Have you found anything interesting?" Lyra asked. Maya's crystal body flashed with confused colors. "Very interesting, and very impossible." "What do you mean?" "These plant cells have DNA from at least 12 different species. Some I recognize, some I don't. But they shouldn't be able to exist together like this. The genetic codes are too different." Lyra looked at the samples under Maya's microscope. The plant cells were moving in patterns that looked almost like they were communicating with each other. "How does Ben make them grow?" "I don't know. But Lyra, I found something else. Some of these genetic patterns, they match readings I took from Ben during his health checks." "What does that mean?" Maya's body turned a deep blue color that Lyra knew meant worry. "It means your husband shares genetic material with plants that shouldn't exist. Either my equipment is completely wrong, or Ben is not what he appears to be." That evening, Zara came to visit them for dinner. She sat at their table and watched Ben serve food he had grown in their garden. The vegetables were perfect, larger and more colorful than anything Lyra had seen before. "Ben," Zara said, cutting into a bright orange tomato, "I've been thinking about what happened with those soldiers today." "Oh?" Ben asked, not looking up from his plate. "Their equipment broke down in your garden. That's not normal." Technology can be unpredictable around some plants. Zara put down her fork and stared at Ben. "I was a warrior for 30 years. I know the difference between equipment failure and something else." "What else could it be?" "I don't know. But I know military gear when I see it. Those weapons and computers are designed to work in any environment. They don't just break because someone touches a flower." Ben finally looked up at her. His eyes were calm, but Lyra saw something else in them. Something careful and watching. "Maybe their equipment was defective," Ben said. "Maybe," Zara said, but her voice showed she didn't believe it. After dinner, Lyra walked with Ben in their garden. The plants around them swayed gently in the evening breeze. Some of the flowers were starting to glow as darkness fell. "Ben," she said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Where did you live before you came to Verdania Prime?" Ben was quiet for a long moment. They walked past a section of the garden where impossible vines grew in perfect spirals around metal poles. "I lived on many different worlds," he said finally. "What kind of work did you do?" Another long pause. "Different kinds of work." "Ben, you never really tell me about your past. Were you a scientist? A farmer? A soldier?" Ben stopped walking and looked at her. In the growing darkness, his face was hard to read. "Does it matter? I'm here now with you. Isn't that enough? I just want to know more about the man I married." Ben reached out and touched one of the glowing roses. The flower pulsed brighter at his touch, and other flowers around them began to glow in response. "Some things are better left in the past," he said softly. That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to Ben work in the garden again, but this time she heard voices. Ben was talking to someone out there. She crept to the window and looked out. Ben was standing in the center of the garden, but she couldn't see anyone else. Yet she could clearly hear him having a conversation. "I know you're worried," Ben was saying, "but we have to be careful. If they find out too soon, everything we've worked for will be lost. A breeze moved through the garden, making the leaves rustle. It almost sounded like whispers. Yes, I know they're getting suspicious. Maya's too smart, and Zara has good instincts, but Lyra, I can't lose her. Not now. The plants around him swayed more as if responding to his words. We'll stick to the plan. Just a little longer. Once the transformation is complete, it won't matter what they know. Lyra pressed closer to the window, trying to understand what Ben was talking about. Transformation? What transformation? Ben suddenly looked directly at her window. Even though the room was dark, she felt like he could see her clearly. I have to go, he said to the garden. She's watching. He walked toward the house, and Lyra quickly got back into bed. She pretended to be asleep when Ben came into their room a few minutes later. The next day brought terrible news. The research facility at the edge of town had been broken into during the night. Several dangerous alien creatures had escaped from their containment areas. These were not pets or farm animals. They were predators that the scientists studied for their aggressive behaviors. Commander Morrison gathered the town in the square again. His face was angry and worried. Last night, someone released 12 Category 5 hostile organisms from the research center, he announced. These creatures are extremely dangerous. Everyone must stay indoors after sunset until we can recapture them. The crowd murmured with fear. Category 5 organisms were the most dangerous classification, creatures that could kill armed soldiers with ease. How did they escape? Someone called out. The security systems were disabled from the inside. Someone with advanced knowledge of the facility's defenses let them out. Lyra felt sick. Who would do such a thing? Those creatures could kill innocent people. But as the day went on, something strange happened. Reports came in that the escaped creatures had been spotted around town, but they weren't attacking anyone. Instead, they seemed calm and peaceful. Some people even saw them playing gently with local children. By evening, all 12 creatures had been found. They were discovered in Ben's greenhouse, arranged in neat rows like they were sleeping. Each one was perfectly calm and healthy. When the soldiers came to collect them, the creatures followed peacefully, showing no signs of the aggression they were known for. Commander Morrison questioned Ben for hours about how the creatures ended up in his greenhouse. Ben's answer was simple. He found them there in the morning and called for help immediately. The commander wasn't satisfied, but he had no evidence that Ben had done anything wrong. That night, Lyra confronted her husband. Those creatures, she said. How did they really end up in our greenhouse? Ben was washing dishes, his movements slow and careful as always. I told the commander everything I know. Ben, please, I'm your wife. I know when you're not telling the truth. Ben stopped washing and turned to look at her. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked tired. Lyra, there are things about me that you wouldn't understand. Things that might scare you. Try me. Ben dried his hands and sat down across from her at their kitchen table. Outside the window, the garden glowed softly in the darkness. What if I told you that everything you think you know about me is wrong? He asked quietly. What do you mean? What if the quiet farmer you married isn't who I really am? What if I'm something else entirely? Lyra's heart started beating faster. What are you saying? Ben reached across the table and took her hands in his. His skin was warm and rough from gardening, just like always. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw depths she had never noticed before. I'm saying that soon. You're going to learn things about me that will change everything. And I need you to be. Lyra didn't stay in the house. She couldn't. The alarms were too loud, the fires too bright, and her worry for Ben too strong. She grabbed a flashlight and ran outside into the chaos. The town was in panic. People ran through the streets, some heading toward the fires, others running away from them. In the distance, she could see the Galactic Council base, surrounded by strange green light. Explosions echoed across the night, but they didn't sound like weapons. They sounded like trees falling. She ran toward the base, fighting against the crowd of people fleeing in the opposite direction. As she got closer, she saw something impossible. The metal walls of the military base were covered in thick vines that pulsed with green energy. Guard towers leaned at crazy angles, their foundations cracked by massive roots that had grown overnight. Soldiers ran around in confusion, their weapons sparking and dying whenever they tried to fire. Their vehicles wouldn't start. Even their communication devices were silent. "What's happening?" Lyra called out to a soldier who was stumbling past her. "The plants!" the soldier gasped. "They're alive! They're fighting back!" Lyra looked around and saw what he meant. Every plant near the base was moving. Grass reached up to tangle the soldiers' feet. Flowers released clouds of sparkling dust that made the men fall asleep where they stood. Trees bent down to block doorways and windows. But strangest of all, none of the soldiers seemed to be seriously hurt. They were trapped, confused, and helpless, but not injured. She heard Zara's voice calling her name and turned to see her friend running toward her. "Lyra, what are you doing here? It's dangerous. I'm looking for Ben. Have you seen him?" Zara's expression became strange. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. I saw him tonight." "Where?" "Follow me." "But Lyra, you need to prepare yourself. What I'm about to show you will change everything." They moved through the chaos toward a hill that overlooked the base. Zara led her to a cluster of rocks where they could hide and watch what was happening below. "There," Zara pointed. Lyra looked where she was pointing and felt her world turn upside down. Ben was standing in the middle of the battle, but he wasn't running or hiding like everyone else. He was walking calmly through the fighting, and as he moved, the plants around him responded to his presence. Vines parted to let him pass. Flowers turned to follow his movement like they were watching him. She watched as a group of soldiers tried to surround him. Ben raised one hand, and the ground beneath their feet sprouted thick grass that wrapped around their legs, holding them gently but firmly in place. Their weapons sparked and died in their hands. "How is he doing that?" Lyra whispered. "I don't know," Zara said, "but I know what it means. Your husband is the gardener." Lyra felt sick. "That's impossible. Ben is gentle. He grows flowers. He makes tea. He reads books about plant care. He's not some galaxy-destroying criminal." "Look at him, Lyra. Really look." She looked again. Ben was no longer moving like the quiet farmer she knew. His steps were confident and precise. His posture was straight and alert. When soldiers appeared, he moved to avoid them with fluid grace that spoke of combat training. This wasn't her gentle husband. This was someone else entirely. "We have to go," Zara said. "If the council forces figure out who he is..." But it was too late. A new ship was landing near the base, larger than the others. It was painted black and silver, with symbols that made Zara curse in her native language. "What is it?" Lyra asked. "Elite command ship. Someone important is here." The ship's doors opened, and a figure stepped out that made Lyra's breath catch. It was an elf, tall and proud, wearing a military uniform covered in medals and insignia. Her hair was white as snow, and her eyes glowed with inner fire. "Admiral Vex Morningstar," Zara breathed, "the hero of the Battle of Centauri. They only send her for the most dangerous missions." The Admiral walked through the chaos like she owned it. Plants tried to block her path, but she moved through them with a sword that glowed with its own light, cutting through vines and roots with ease. She walked directly toward Ben, who had stopped moving and was watching her approach. "Gardener," the Admiral called out, her voice carrying clearly across the battlefield. "I am Admiral Morningstar of the Galactic Council Elite Forces. You will surrender yourself immediately." Ben looked at her calmly. "Admiral, I wondered when they would send you. Your reign of terror ends tonight." "Terror?" Ben asked. "Look around you, Admiral. Do you see any bodies, any destroyed buildings, any real damage at all?" Lyra realized. He was right. The base was covered in plants and the soldiers were trapped, but nobody seemed to be hurt. The explosions she had heard were just trees breaking through concrete, not weapons firing. "You've disabled an entire military installation," the Admiral said. "I've stopped them from hurting innocent people. There's a difference. You cannot be allowed to continue. Every world you touch loses its freedom. Every world I touch finds peace." The Admiral raised her glowing sword. "Peace forced upon people is not peace at all. It's slavery." Ben shook his head sadly. "You still don't understand. I don't force anything. I simply help things grow the way they want to grow." As he spoke, Lyra noticed changes happening around the battlefield. The soldiers who had been trapped by the plants were no longer struggling. Instead, they were looking around with wonder, as if seeing the world clearly for the first time. Some were helping each other out of the vines. Others were sitting peacefully, talking to each other in quiet voices. "What's happening to them?" Lyra asked. Zara was staring at the scene below. "I don't know. But look at their faces. They don't look afraid anymore." It was true. The panic and anger that had filled the soldiers was fading. They moved more slowly, more thoughtfully. When they looked at each other, there was understanding in their eyes instead of suspicion. "He's changing them," Lyra realized. Not forcing them. Just helping them see things differently. Down below, the Admiral and Ben were still talking, but now they were surrounded by a circle of calm soldiers and peaceful plants. "This is what you do, isn't it?" the Admiral said. "You make people different." "I help them become what they already are deep inside," Ben replied. "I remove the fear and anger that stops them from connecting with each other. And their freedom to choose? They're choosing right now. Look at them." The Admiral looked around, at her soldiers. They were no longer following orders or maintaining military positions. Instead, they were acting like individuals making their own decisions. Some were helping trapped civilians. Others were studying the plants with curiosity instead of fear. "This is wrong," the Admiral said, but her voice was less certain than before. "Is it? Your soldiers seem happier now, more at peace. They're not soldiers anymore, they're something else. They're human beings, without the weight of violence and fear pressing down on them." Maya appeared beside Lyra and Zara, having climbed the hill to find them. Her crystal body was flashing with rapid, complex patterns of light. "I've been studying the changes," she said without greeting. "The plants, the people, even the air itself. There are spores in the atmosphere, microscopic organisms that bond with biological systems." "What do they do?" Lyra asked. "They enhance empathy. They increase connection between individuals. They don't control minds, but they make it easier for people to understand each other's feelings and needs." "So Ben is drugging everyone?" "Not drugging, evolving. These organisms work with existing brain chemistry to unlock capacities that were already there. It's like removing barriers that prevent natural cooperation." Lyra watched her husband standing calmly in the center of the transformed battlefield. This was why the Galactic Council feared him. Not because he destroyed things, but because he changed them so completely that they could never go back to the way they were before. "How long has this been happening?" she asked. "Based on the complexity of the changes?" "Years. Maybe since the day he arrived on Verdania Prime." "You mean he's been changing all of us?" Maya's crystal body turned a soft blue color. "Yes, including us. Haven't you noticed how much more peaceful our town has become over the past 3 years? How much better different species get along here compared to other worlds?" Lyra thought about it. She had noticed those things, but she thought it was just because Verdania Prime was a good place to live. Now she realized the truth. Ben had been quietly transforming their entire world, helping it become the peaceful paradise she thought it naturally was. "I need to talk to him," she said. "Lyra." "No," Zara warned. "It's too dangerous down there." But Lyra was already moving down the hill toward the confrontation between her husband and the Admiral. She had to know the truth. She had to hear it from Ben himself. As she approached, both Ben and Admiral Morningstar turned to look at her. The Admiral's hand moved to her sword, but Ben held up a hand to stop her. "She's my wife," he said simply. "A local?" the Admiral asked. "An elf. A scientist. Someone who deserves to know the truth." Lyra walked up to Ben, aware that dozens of eyes were watching her. The soldiers, the Admiral, even the plants seemed to be waiting to see what she would do. "Is it true?" she asked. "Are you really the gardener?" Ben looked at her with sad eyes. "Yes." "Have you been changing me? Changing our town? Changing everyone?" "Yes." "Why?" Ben reached out slowly and took her hands. The next morning came quietly. The alarms had stopped. The fires were out. The Galactic Council base sat covered in peaceful green vines that sparkled with dew in the early sunlight. Lyra sat at her kitchen table, watching Ben make breakfast like he did every day. But everything was different now. She knew who he really was, and she could see things she had missed before. The way he moved with perfect balance, the way his eyes constantly watched for danger even while he smiled. The way plants in their kitchen grew just a little bit toward him. "We need to talk," she said. Ben nodded and sat down across from her. "I know. Tell me everything. The real truth this time." Ben was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at their garden. "My name really is Ben Parker. That part was true. But everything else?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I was a soldier, special forces, part of a program so secret that most governments don't know it exists. We were called environmental warfare specialists." "What does that mean?" "We used biological weapons, but not the kind that kill people, the kind that change how ecosystems work. We could make forests hostile to enemy armies, turn farmland into swamps, make desert planets bloom with life." Lyra felt cold. "You destroyed worlds." "No, we changed them. But the change was supposed to be temporary, a tool for ending wars quickly with minimal casualties." "What went wrong?" Ben's expression became distant, like he was remembering something painful. "I was on a mission to stop a war between two alien species. They had been fighting for generations over water rights on a desert world. Millions were dying." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at his impossible garden. "My team was supposed to trigger temporary ecosystem changes that would force both sides to negotiate, but something happened during the mission. I was exposed to organisms we had never seen before, alien microbes that were already in the planet's soil. What did they do? They bonded with my DNA, changed my cellular structure, gave me abilities I never asked for." Ben turned back to look at her. "Suddenly, I could feel every living thing on that planet. Plants, animals, even the bacteria in the soil. And they could feel me. We became connected." "Is that how you control plants?" "I don't control them. I communicate with them. They respond because they understand what I'm trying to do. They want the same thing I want, which is peace, growth, life without violence or fear." Lyra tried to understand what he was telling her. "So, you're part alien now?" "Part human, part alien, part something entirely new. The scientists who studied me afterward said I represent the next step in human evolution. A bridge between species." "What happened to your team?" Ben's face became sad. "They tried to bring me back for study. They wanted to replicate what had happened to me. Create more soldiers like me." "You refused?" "I escaped. And I realized that I didn't want to be a weapon anymore. I wanted to use my abilities to actually end conflicts, not just win them." Ben sat back down and reached for her hands. She let him take them, feeling the warmth and strength in his fingers. "Every world I've visited since then has been a place torn apart by war or violence. I help the ecosystems evolve in ways that make aggression difficult and cooperation easier. It's not mind control. It's more like teaching." "Teaching what? That?" "There are other ways to live. That fear and anger aren't natural states. That different species can work together instead of fighting each other." Lyra looked into his eyes and saw the man she had fallen in love with. But now she also saw the incredible loneliness of someone who carried such a heavy responsibility. "How many worlds have you changed?" 17, including this one. "And they all accepted the changes?" Ben smiled sadly. "Eventually. It takes time, usually a few years for the full transformation. But yes, they all chose peace in the end." A knock at their door interrupted the conversation. Lyra opened it to find Admiral Morningstar standing on their porch. The elf woman looked tired and uncertain, very different from the confident warrior she had been the night before. "May I come in?" the Admiral asked. "Of course," Ben said from the kitchen. "Would you like some tea?" The Admiral sat down at their table and accepted a cup of the herbal tea Ben made from his garden plants. She sipped it carefully, then looked at him with suspicious eyes. "Is this one of your special teas?" "All my teas are special. But if you're asking whether it will change your mind about anything, the answer is no. The changes I make take years, not minutes." "Then why do I feel so calm?" "Because you slept well last night for the first time in months. Because you're not in immediate danger. Because you're finally talking to someone who understands the weight you carry. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. My soldiers want to stay. I'm not surprised. They should want to complete the mission. They should want to bring you in for trial. Instead, they're asking me to request permanent assignment to Verdania Prime. Ben nodded. They've experienced what life can be like without constant fear and aggression. It's hard to go back once you know there's another way. This is exactly what the Council fears. You don't just change individuals. You change entire cultures. I helped them evolve into what they were always capable of becoming. The Admiral set down her teacup and looked directly at Lyra. What do you think about all this? Your husband is arguably the most wanted criminal in the galaxy. Lyra had been thinking about this all morning. I think, she said slowly, that Ben isn't a criminal at all. He's something the galaxy doesn't have words for yet. Explain. Look at our town. Look at your soldiers. Look at yourself right now. Are any of you unhappy? Do any of you feel oppressed or controlled? The Admiral considered this. No, I feel clearer. Like I can think more clearly than I have in years. That's what Ben does. He doesn't force change. He removes the obstacles that prevent natural growth and healing. Maya and Zara arrived together, having apparently spent the night comparing notes and observations. We need to talk about what happens next, Zara said without preamble. The Galactic Council isn't going to accept this situation. More ships are coming, Maya added. I intercepted their communications. They're sending a full fleet. Ben didn't look surprised. I expected as much. They'll destroy the planet before they let you escape again, the Admiral said quietly. Then we don't let me escape, Ben replied. Everyone looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? Lyra asked. Ben stood up and walked to the window again. I mean, it's time to stop hiding. Time to show the galaxy what's really possible. You want to surrender? Zara asked. I want to demonstrate. The Council fears me because they don't understand what I do. They think I'm a conqueror or a mind controller. But if they could see the truth... What truth? The Admiral asked. Ben turned back to them with a smile that was both gentle and determined. That what I do isn't unique to me. Every species has the potential for this kind of transformation. Humans just happen to be particularly adaptable. Maya's crystal body flashed with understanding. You're saying other people could develop abilities like yours? With the right catalyst, yes. The organisms that changed me exist on dozens of worlds. They're not rare. They're just waiting for the right conditions. You want to teach others to do what you do, Lyra said. I want to give the galaxy a choice. Continue living with war and fear and violence, or evolve into something better. The Admiral leaned back in her chair. The Council will never allow that. The Council won't have a choice. Change is coming whether they approve or not. I'm just trying to help it happen peacefully. And if they refuse? Ben's expression became serious. Then they'll learn what the gardener can really do when he stops being gentle. As if summoned by his words, alarms began blaring again throughout the town. But these weren't the local alarms from the night before. These were the deep, urgent sounds that meant serious trouble. They all rushed outside to see the sky filled with ships, not just a few council vessels, but an entire fleet. Dozens of massive warships hung in the atmosphere like dark clouds. A voice boomed down from the ships, amplified to reach every corner of the planet. This is Fleet Admiral Stone of the Galactic Council. The planet Verdania Prime is under martial law. All civilians will evacuate immediately. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. Ben looked up at the ships with calm eyes. They're going to sterilize the planet. What does that mean? Lyra asked, though she was afraid she already knew. They're going to burn away every living thing on the surface. Make sure none of my contamination can spread. The Admiral's face went pale. They can't. There are innocent people here. They think they're saving the galaxy from something worse than death, Ben said. They think they're preventing the spread of a plague. Can you stop them? Zara asked. Ben looked at each of them in turn. His wife, who had accepted the truth about him with love instead of fear. The warrior who had chosen to stand with him, despite her training. The healer who sought to understand rather than judge. The Admiral who was beginning to question everything she had believed. Yes, he said simply. But if I do, There's no going back. The galaxy will see what humanity is truly capable of. What all of us are capable of, given the chance to grow. Do it, Lyra said without hesitation. Ben smiled at her with infinite love and gratitude. The moment Ben's hands touched the earth, everything changed. Lyra felt it first as a vibration through the ground beneath her feet, then as a humming in the air around them. The garden around Ben began to pulse with light that grew brighter and brighter until she had to shield her eyes. But it wasn't just their garden. Across the planet, every plant was glowing. Every tree, every flower, every blade of grass sparkled with the same gentle light. From space, Verdania Prime must have looked like a giant star. "What is he doing?" Admiral Morningstar asked, her voice filled with wonder and fear. Maya's crystal body was flashing rapid patterns as she tried to understand what her sensors were telling her. The entire planetary ecosystem is connecting. Every plant, every microorganism, even the soil itself. It's becoming one massive living network. In the sky above them, the council ships began to shake. Their weapons powered down. Their engines went silent. One by one, the massive warships started drifting helplessly in space. "He's not attacking them," Zara realized. "He's just turning off their technology." "How?" the Admiral demanded. Ben stood up slowly, his hands still glowing with the same light as the plants around him. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the entire planet, somehow reaching every person on the surface. "People of Verdania Prime," he said, "and visitors from the stars, you are witnessing the birth of something new. Not conquest, not destruction, evolution." In the sky, the council ships were completely powerless now, but instead of falling from the sky, they were being gently lowered to the ground by massive vines that had grown up from the planet's surface. "Fleet Admiral Stone," Ben's voice continued, somehow reaching the ships as well. "You came here to destroy what you fear, but I invite you to see it instead. Come down to the surface. Walk among us. Learn what we have discovered." Lyra watched as landing pods began dropping from the disabled ships. The council forces were coming down to the planet, but not as conquerors. They were coming as guests, whether they wanted to or not. "Ben," she called out. "What's the plan?" He turned to look at her, and she saw that his eyes were now glowing, with the same gentle light as the plants. "The plan is to show them that there's nothing to fear, that what we've become is better than what we were." The first council soldiers to reach the ground came running toward them with weapons drawn. But as they got closer to the garden, their weapons began to spark and fail. More importantly, their faces began to change. The anger and fear faded from their expressions, replaced by curiosity and wonder. "Stand down," one of them called to his fellow soldiers. "I don't think they're hostile." Admiral Morningstar stepped forward to meet them. "I am Admiral Vex Morningstar. These people are under my protection." "Admiral?" The lead soldier looked confused. "Our orders are to secure the area and eliminate the target." "Orders change," she said simply. "Look around you. Do you see any threats here?" The soldier did look around. He saw a peaceful garden full of impossible plants. He saw Lyra, Maya, and Zara standing calmly beside a human who glowed with soft light. He saw townspeople gathering nearby, not to fight, but to watch with curiosity what would happen next. No, Admiral. I don't see any threats." More landing pods arrived, bringing larger groups of soldiers, but the same thing happened each time. As they got closer to Ben and his garden, their aggression faded. Their weapons stopped working. Their fear transformed into wonder. Within an hour, hundreds of council soldiers were gathered in the area around Ben's garden. They sat on the grass, talked quietly among themselves, and stared in amazement at the glowing plants around them. Fleet Admiral Stone arrived in the final pod, a large human man covered in military decorations. He strode toward Ben with determination, but like all the others, his anger faded as he got closer. "You're him," Stone said. "The gardener." "I'm Ben Parker," Ben replied. "I'm a farmer who grows unusual plants. I'm a husband who loves his wife. I'm a neighbor who cares about his community. And yes, I'm also the person you've been hunting. You've disabled my entire fleet. I've protected my home. Your ships are undamaged. Your crews are safe. When this is over, everything will work normally again." When what is over? Ben gestured to the gathering crowd of soldiers, townspeople, and the various alien species who called Verdania Prime home. When you understand what we've built here, when you see that it's not something to be feared or destroyed. You've contaminated these people, changed them against their will, have I? Ben looked around at the crowd. Let's ask them. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. People of Verdania Prime, soldiers of the Galactic Council, you've all been exposed to the changes I've brought to this world. Do any of you feel controlled? Do any of you feel like your free will has been taken away? A murmur went through the crowd as people considered the question. One of the council soldiers spoke up. I feel clearer, like I can think better than I have in years. I feel more connected to everyone around me, added a local farmer. I don't want to fight anymore, another soldier said. Not because I can't, but because I don't see the point. There are better ways to solve problems. More voices joined in, all saying similar things. They felt peaceful, but not drugged. They felt connected, but not controlled. They felt like themselves, only better. Fleet Admiral Stone listened to his soldiers with growing amazement. This is impossible. You're telling me these changes are voluntary? Not voluntary, Ben corrected. Natural. I don't force anyone to change. I just remove the barriers that prevent them from growing into what they're already capable of becoming. Show me, Stone demanded. Show me exactly what you do. Ben nodded and walked over to a small patch of bare ground. He knelt down and placed his hands on the soil. Immediately, tiny green shoots began to emerge. They grew rapidly, becoming flowers that sparkled with inner light. The organisms that live in this soil are the same ones that bonded with my DNA years ago, Ben explained, as he worked. They enhance empathy, reduce aggression, and increase the ability to understand other perspectives. They don't control thoughts or emotions. They just make it easier for people to connect with each other. And they're spreading? They're already everywhere. These microorganisms exist naturally on hundreds of worlds. They've been waiting for the right conditions to become active. Maya stepped forward. I've been studying them for months. They're not dangerous. If anything, they're beneficial. Worlds with higher concentrations of these organisms have lower rates of violence, better cooperation between species, and more stable ecosystems. You're talking about changing the fundamental nature of galactic civilization, Stone said. I'm talking about helping galactic civilization evolve into something better than constant war and competition. Lyra moved to stand beside her husband. Admiral Stone, look at your soldiers. Look at how they're interacting with our people. Do you see any problems? Stone did look. His soldiers were sitting with local farmers, sharing stories and laughing, together. Different species that normally viewed each other with suspicion were working together to tend the glowing plants. Council officers were playing with local children. This is how every world could be, Ben said quietly. This is what we're capable of when we're not constantly fighting each other. And if we refuse, Stone asked, if the council decides this, change is too dangerous, Ben's expression became serious. Then you'll discover what I'm capable of when I stop being gentle. But I hope it doesn't come to that. Before Stone could respond, a new voice called out across the gathering. It won't come to that. Everyone turned to see a figure approaching from the town. It was another elf, dressed in robes that marked her as a member of the Galactic Council's highest leadership. Counselor Starweaver, Admiral Morningstar said with surprise. What are you doing here? I came to see for myself, the counselor replied. When Admiral Stone's fleet went silent, we feared the worst. But your reports, Admiral, suggested something more complex was happening. She walked directly to Ben, studying him with wise old eyes. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? A monster, a conqueror, someone drunk on power and destruction. She looked around at the peaceful gathering. Instead, I find a gardener who grows impossible flowers and helps people remember how to be kind to each other. Is that so surprising? For a human? Yes. Your species is known for its aggression and territorial nature. Ben smiled. My species is known for its adaptability. We can become aggressive when we need to survive, but we can also become something much better when we're given the chance. Counselor Starweaver was quiet for a long moment, considering everything she had seen and heard. The council will debate this for years, she said finally. Some will call for your destruction. Others will want to study you. A few might even support what you're doing. And what will you recommend? I will recommend that we learn, that we watch, that we see what happens to the worlds you've changed, and judge the results rather than the methods. She turned to address the gathering crowd. People of Verdania Prime, the Galactic Council hereby grants this world special status. You will be observed but not interfered with. Your experiment in cooperation will be allowed to continue. And Ben? Lyra asked. Ben Parker will be free to continue his work, but under council supervision.